December 9th, 1977, just 16 days before Christmas, was a day that would change the lives of Dale and Ruth Fox forever. This was the day they learned their daughter, 25-year-old Nancy Fox, was the victim of a brutal murder in her small pink two-bedroom duplex apartment where she'd lived alone for the last 2 years. Dennis Rader had begun preparations for Project Foxhunt long before this fateful night, even going so far as to visit her work more than once to get a better idea of who she was. Rader felt no need to change his methods and continued to surprise women when they came home, only this time he added to his repertoire. Not long after Nancy Fox became BTK's seventh victim, Dennis Rader began to wonder why he wasn't getting more airtime on the news. He figured that by this time he was a big deal in Wichita, Kansas, and decided that if they weren't going to discuss him voluntarily, then he was going to make it happen. He didn't just want to be a local story, he wanted national attention, and this is when things really started getting weird. Welcome to part 4 of our series on BTK, where we give an extremely detailed look into the murder of Nancy Fox and the subsequent contact of BTK with the media and investigators, which starts the games Rader enjoyed playing with law enforcement. I'm Elton Morgan, and this is the American Serial Killer Guidebook. Please help support us if you can, even if it's just with a like, subscribe, and review, because they really help the show. And I don't know about you, but I'll be checking the closets and under the bed from now on when I get home at night. "9:15 p.m. Thursday, December 8th, 1977 was an extremely dark, cold, and windy evening in Wichita, Kansas. Nancy Jo Fox had just finished her shift at Hellsberg's jewelry store in the Wichita Mall and was walking to her car in the parking lot alongside her friend and manager, Candy Dufresne. After saying their goodbyes, Nancy headed to the Wendy's drive-thru for a burger before eating it in the car heading home. Home for Nancy was a pink duplex with one side unoccupied at 843 South Pershing that didn't have a back door. Once inside, she followed her usual routine of tossing her heavy coat on the couch before placing her purse on the table and heading into the kitchen for some water because she was thirsty after finishing her burger. It was at this time that Dennis Rader emerged, destroying the lives of the Fox family forever. A cool afternoon the first week of November 1977, Dennis Rader had some time between classes at Wichita State University, where he was part of the criminal justice program. He used this time like he did most days, cruising the neighborhoods not far from campus in his trolling phase looking for new projects. It was on this day that Dennis Rader spotted Nancy Fox walking into her house. Finding her attractive, he decided to write down her address at 843 South Pershing, making a mental note to find out as much as he could about her. A few days later, on another break between classes, Rader drove past her house, and after making sure no one was around, he stopped and opened her mailbox looking for any identifying information, which is when he discovered the name of his next potential victim. Over the next few weeks, he found a spot within view of Nancy's house and sat, watching her, trying to get a sense of her schedule until one afternoon he decided to follow her. Making sure not to be seen, Dennis Rader followed Nancy Fox to the Wichita Mall, and after parking within sight of her vehicle, he followed her inside where he saw her walk into the Hellsberg jewelry store. A couple of days later, Rader thought about how close he could get to Miss Fox, so he excitedly went to her job at Hellsberg's and pretended to be a browsing customer. He couldn't believe how aroused he became because he had never before interacted with one of his projects outside of the actual murders. Being meticulous in his research, a week later, BTK once again visited Nancy Fox at the mall, hanging around until closing to make sure of when she got off work and her likely route home to ensure he had his timing down. Around 8 p.m. the night of December 8th, 1977, an hour before Nancy got off work, Dennis Rader parked his car a few blocks away and walked up the street towards her small but comfortable duplex. Seeing no car in the driveway, he walked up and knocked on the front door a few times to make sure no one was there. He had no interest in any more unexpected guests messing with his plans. After no one answered, he walked around back and cut the phone line and broke in through a back window after breaking the glass. Once inside, Rader took a seat in the kitchen and waited for Project Foxhunt to begin. By the time Nancy Fox saw Rader in her kitchen, it was already too late. He told her to calm down and that he wasn't going to hurt her. He told her to sit down at the table, which is when he began to explain that he had sexual problems and that he had to tie her up and have sex with her, but then he would let her go. She became very upset and asked if she could smoke a cigarette. Rader said yes, so she fired one up and they chatted while she smoked, all in an effort to ease her mind so he could maintain control of the situation. The last thing he wanted was for her to suspect what was really about to happen and panic. After the repeated fighting with Karen Bright and her brother Kevin, he was not in the mood to repeat those events. While she smoked, Rader went through her purse looking for tokens or trophies he could look back on later to enjoy remembering this night. Once she had finally come to terms with what she thought was about to happen, she said, "Well, let's get this over with so I can go call the police." Rader told her okay, which is when Nancy asked if she could go to the bathroom first, and he told her yes, but when you come out naked. And once she shut the door, Rader began to get half undressed himself. When she came out of the bathroom, she was almost nude, so he walked over and asked her to put her hands behind her back. When she did, he did something he had never done before. Rather than ropes, which he was extremely fond of, he placed handcuffs on her. He wasn't taking any chances with her trying to fight him once she realized what was happening and breaking her bonds. Once she was cuffed, he had her lie on her stomach on the bed and he tied her feet. He then climbed on top of her, straddling her, and placed his belt around her neck and began strangling her. Once she was almost unconscious, Rader removed the belt, grabbed a pair of pantyhose, and leaned in close to her ear. Once he was sure she was coherent enough to understand him, he whispered, "I'm BTK. I'm a bad dude." It wasn't enough for Dennis Rader to simply kill his victims. He had to revel in their terror. And once Nancy Fox realized who he was and that she wasn't going to make it out of this ordeal alive, she began to squirm violently, which only made Rader enjoy it even more. This is when he placed the pantyhose around her neck, and in his words, "I pulled. I really put the pressure down on it." Once he was sure she was dead, he removed the handcuffs and retied her hands with pantyhose, then stood over her body and masturbated, having once again fulfilled his hellish fantasy. Rader then decided that since he had some time to spare, he might as well go through her stuff and see what he could find. He didn't bother with valuables of any kind. Instead, he gathered up some of her nicer clothes, slips, and stockings. Basically, anything he thought he would enjoy dressing up in later when acting out his crimes in private for his own pleasure. Rader then cleaned up everything he thought could be considered evidence that might have fingerprints or otherwise give investigators any clues, and walked a few blocks back to his car and headed home. Once home, he saw his wife had waited up, and since they had been having issues with their car, he told her he was out late due to car trouble. The next morning, on his way to work at ADT, he stopped at the payphone outside of a downtown store to call 911 and report his crime. The following is the actual audio from his 911 call.
Dispatcher? Yes, you will find a homicide at 843 South Pershing. Nancy Fox. I'm sorry, sir, I can't understand you. What is the address? 843 South Pershing. That is correct.
The audio is highly distorted, so the conversation was short and went like this. Operator number 1. Dispatcher, BTK. Yes, you will find a homicide at 843 South Pershing, Nancy Fox. Operator number 1. I'm sorry, sir, I can't understand you. What is the address? Operator number 2. I believe 843 South Pershing, BTK. That is correct. He then left the phone off the hook, got in his car, and headed to work to start what he considered another normal day. Once the police discovered the location of the call, they looked for a witness who may have seen the caller. They only found one person who saw him, and they said it was a tall, white male wearing a gray or blue uniform in a vehicle with writing on the side, which was too vague to be of any use. The following is the report from the Wichita Police Department Homicide Investigations Division. It details exactly what they found when they arrived on the scene of Nancy Fox's brutal murder. Yes, you will find a homicide at 843 South Pershing, Nancy Fox. The call came from a payphone outside Oregon's Market at Central and St. Francis. The time was 8:18 a.m. on December 9, 1977. The male caller had contacted the operator asking for the emergency number to the police department. The operator contacted the dispatcher. The dispatcher asked the caller to repeat the address, and the operator stated he gave 843 South Pershing. The caller said, "That is correct," and left the phone off the hook. Wichita Police Officer John D. Pietra was dispatched to 843 South Pershing, arriving in front of the pink duplex at 8:22 a.m. Officer DePietra knocked on the front door but received no response. The door was locked and the officer went to the back of the duplex. Officer DePietra immediately noticed a severed phone line blowing in the wind. The storm window and interior window to the bedroom were damaged. Officer DePietra went to the window and asked if anyone was home. There was no response. The officer then raised the interior window and asked if anyone was home. After receiving no response, Officer DePietra pushed back the drapes and saw the body of a woman lying face down on the bed. The woman, later identified as 25-year-old Nancy Fox, was lying on one side of a double bed. The officer could see that her ankles were tied with a yellow piece of clothing, and her hands were tied behind her back with a red piece of clothing or pantyhose. Detective Lewis Brown arrived and ordered the door to be kicked in. Law enforcement entered the residence and were struck by its cleanliness. Officer DePietra described the residence as being the cleanest he had ever seen. Detective Brown states that the home was extremely neat. A white woman's parka coat was on the living room couch. A half-smoked cigarette that had burned out was in the ashtray next to a chair. The contents of a purse had been dumped on the kitchen table. The receiver to the kitchen wall phone was lying on the floor. Jewelry boxes on the bedroom dresser had been rifled through with some of the contents emptied onto the dresser. A pair of rumpled pantyhose lay on the floor. Glass from the window was on the floor. The window screen had been cut loose and had blown up against the fence in the backyard. Fresh pry marks were visible on the window lock, and the screws on the lock were torn out and tilted back. Nancy Fox was lying face down on the bed. A pink sweater covered her upper body. A pair of slacks were neatly folded over a cabinet door. Purple panties were pulled down to her thighs. Her feet were bound by a yellow piece of clothing. The hands were tied with red pantyhose. 2 pairs of pantyhose were wrapped around her neck. The lingerie drawer had been removed from the dresser. The drawer and its contents lay on the bed next to Nancy Fox. A blue nightgown was near her head. Semen stains were found on the nightgown. Dr. David Crane performed an autopsy on the body of Nancy Fox. The cause of death was determined to be strangulation. After the successful murder of Nancy Fox, which he called the perfect hit, Dennis Rader waited patiently, watching the news and checking the Wichita Eagle newspaper every day, waiting for his 15 minutes of fame, but continued to be disappointed. As each day passed without mention of his exploits, Rader became more and more upset until he couldn't keep things to himself any longer. He figured that if the police and the news weren't going to cover his crimes, he would make sure it happened by threatening to increase his body count if they didn't do a story on his alter ego, BTK. On February 10th, 1978, KAKE-TV received the following letter from BTK. I'm going to read it verbatim with all grammatical errors included. All right, it's a little tricky to read with all of the misspellings, so please bear with me. I find the newspaper not writing about the poem on Vane unamusing, meaning Shirley Vian. A little paragraph would have enough. I know it not the media fault. The police chief, he keep things quiet and doesn't let the public know they're a psycho running around loose strangling mostly women. There's 7 in the ground. Who will be next? How many do I have to kill before I get a name in the paper or some national attention? Do the cop think that all those deaths are not related? Golly gee, yes, the MO is different in each, but look, a pattern is developing. The victims are tie up, must have been women, phone cut, bring some bondage, mater sadist tendencies, no struggle, outside the death, spot no witness except the Vane's kids. They were very lucky. A phone call saved them. I was going to tape the boys and put plastic bag over their head like I did Joseph and Shirley, and then hang the girl. God, oh God, what a beautiful sexual relief that would been. Josephine, when I hung her, really turned me on. Her pleading for mercy, then the rope took hold. She helpless, staring at me with wide terror-filled eyes, the rope getting tighter, tighter. You don't understand these things because you're not under the influence of Factor X. The same thing that made Son of Sam, Jack the Ripper, Harvey Glattman, Boston Strangler, Dr. H.H. Holmes, Pantyhose Strangler of Florida. Hillside Strangler, Ted of the West Coast, and many more infamous character kill, which seems senseless, but we cannot help it. There is no help, no cure, except death or being caught and put away. It a terrible nightmare, but you see, I don't lose any sleep over it. After a thing like Fox, I come home and go about life like anyone else, and I will be like that until the urge hit me again. It not continuous, and I don't have a lot of time. It take time to set a kill. One mistake and it all over. Since I about blew it on the phone, handwriting is out, letter guide is too long, and typewriter can be traced too. My short poem of death and maybe a drawing later on real picture and maybe a tape of the sound will come your way. How will you know me? Before a murder or murders, you will receive a copy of the initials BTK. You keep that copy, the original will show up someday on Guess Who. May you not be the unluck one. P.S. About some name for me, it's time. 7 down and many more to go. I like the following. How about you? Then he goes on to list the BTK Strangler, Wichita Strangler, Poetic Strangler, the Bondage Strangler, or Psycho, the Wichita Hangman, the Wichita Executioner, the Garrote Fathom, I think he meant Phantom, the Asphyxiator, which sounds like a B movie, and BTK. Number 5, you guess motive and victim. Number 6, you found one Shirley Vane, meaning Vianne, lying belly down on an unmade bed in northeast bedroom, hand tied behind back with black tape and cord, feet and ankles with black tape and legs, ankles tied to west head of the bed with small off-white cord, wrap around legs, hands, arm, finally the neck, many times. A off-white plastic bag over her head loop on with a pink nightie, was barefooted. She was sick, use a glass of water and smoke. 1 or 2 cigarette. House a total mess. Kids took some toys with them to the bathroom, bed against east bathroom door. Chose at random with some pre-planning. Motive factor X. Number 7. One Nancy Fox lying belly down on made bed in southwest bedroom. Hands tied behind back with red pantyhose, feet together with yellow nightie, semi-nude with pink sweater and bra, small necklace, glasses on west dresser, panties below butt, many different than the hosiery. She had a smoke and went to the bathroom before the final act. Very neat housekeeper and dresser rifled, purse in kitchen, empty paper bag. White coat in living room, heat up to about 90 degrees. Christmas tree lights on. Nighties and hose around the room. Hose bag of orange color, it and hosiery on bed. Driver license gone. Seminole stain on or in blue women wear. Chose at random with little pre-planning. Motive factor X. Number 8. Next victim maybe. You will find her hanging with a wire noose. Hands behind back with black tape or cord. Feet with tape or cord gagged, then cord around the body to the neck. Hooded maybe. Possible seminal stain in anus or on body. Will be chosen at random. Some pre-planning. Motive factor X. Included near the end was a poem about the Nancy Fox murder entitled, Oh, Death to Nancy, which reads, Oh, death to Nancy. What is this that I can see? Cold, icy hands taking hold of me. For death has come, you all can see. Hell has opened its gates to trick me. Oh, death, can't you spare me? Over for another year. I'll stuff your jaws till you can't talk. I'll bind your legs till you can't walk. I'll tie your hands till you can't make a stand. And finally, I'll close your eyes so you can't see. I'll bring sexual death unto you for me. BTK. The final page was a drawn depiction of Nancy Fox's murder scene. After receiving the letter, investigators quickly searched for the Shirley Vianne poem Rader mentioned on the first page. It was found in the dead letter pile at the news station. The poem was short but detailed Shirley's final moments, reading, Shirley locks, Shirley locks, wilt thou be mine? Thou shalt not scream, not yet feel the line, but lay on a cushion and think of me, and death and how it's going to be. Not only was Dennis Rader reaching out to the media and police in an effort to gain attention for his crimes, but he also relished the fact that he thought he was smarter than investigators, and enjoyed taunting them. The following is a direct accounting from the Wichita Police Department's Homicide Investigations Division report on that letter from BTK. On February 10, 1978, KAKE Television notified the Wichita Police Department that the station had received a 4-page document postmarked February 9, 1978 regarding the Otero, Vian, and Fox homicides. Ron Lowen of KAKE TV turned the letter over to Colonel Bill Cornwell and Lieutenant Bernie Drowatsky of the Wichita Police Department. In the first line of the document, the author complained about the lack of media coverage, specifically mentioning the failure of the newspaper to publish a poem about the Vian murder. Law enforcement was unaware of a poem regarding the Vian murder and immediately began attempts to locate the poem. The investigation turned up a poem that had been sent to the Eagle Beacon newspaper, postmarked January 31, 1978. The poem had been placed in the dead letter file when Eagle Beacon employees thought it was a Valentine that arrived without payment. Mary Larry of the Eagle Beacon delivered the poem to Detective Drowatsky on February 10, 1978. The poem was titled Shirley Locks and was believed to have been taken from the poem Curly Locks. The Curly Locks poem had recently been published in Games, a word puzzle magazine. The short poem did not provide detail of the Vian murder, but did indicate the cruel delight that the murderer derived from the suffering of the victim. The author of the child's poem described Shirley Vian's knowledge of her impending death by writing, "Thou shalt not scream nor yet free the line, but lay on cushion and think of me in death and how it's going to be." The author said a poem for Fox would be next. The first page of the document sent to KAKE TV exhibited a frustration with the lack of media attention. The author complained, "How many do I have to kill before I get a name in the paper or some national attention?" Law enforcement was criticized for supposedly not recognizing the connection between the Otero, Vian, Fox, and another unnamed murder. The author stated, "Do the cop think that all those deaths are not related? Golly gee, yes, the MO is different in each, but look, a pattern is developing." A description of the pattern is provided, and the author admitted that the Vian children are lucky to be alive. A phone call saved them. "I was going to tape the boys and put plastic bag over their head like I did Joseph and Shirley, and then hang the girl." The author fantasized about hanging the little Vian girl, writing, "God, oh God, what a beautiful sexual relief that would have been. A perverse, remorseless, barbaric pleasure in the torture of 11-year-old Josephine Otero is then described. Josephine, when I hung her, really turned me on. Her pleading for mercy, then the rope took hold, she helpless, staring at me with wide, terror-filled eyes, the rope getting tighter, tighter." Factor X is offered up as an excuse for the murders. The author did not explain Factor X, but claimed that other serial killers had Factor X. After offering an excuse, the killer dismissed any concern over the murders, casually stating, "I don't lose any sleep over it. After a thing like Fox, I come home and go about life like anyone else." Finally, the author requested a name, boasting, "It's time, 7 down and many more to go," and then offered name suggestions, including the BTK Strangler. The second page began with a boast of a previously unclaimed 5th victim after the Oteros. The killer did not identify the victim, simply writing, "Number 5, you guess motive and victim." The rest of the page described the murder of number 6, one Shirley Vian, and number 7, one Nancy Fox, and threatened a number 8. The third page is a poem titled "Oh Death to Nancy," describing the murder of Nancy Fox. The killer savored the suffering inflicted on Nancy Fox. "I'll stuff your jaws till you can't talk. I'll bind your legs till you can't walk. I'll tie your hands till you can't make a stand. And finally, I'll close your eyes so you can't see. I'll bring sexual death unto you for me." The fourth page is a graphic depiction of the Nancy Fox murder scene. The drawing is detailed and disturbingly accurate. Wow. I gotta tell you, folks, that was rough. I'd like to thank you for following me on this journey through the demented mind and crimes of Dennis Rader, aka BTK. Show us some love with a like and subscribe, and help support the show if you can. Don't miss our next episode, where we will delve into the unbelievable luck of Anna Williams. the one woman to escape the clutches of Dennis Rader, who waited inside her house for hours to end her life. But she was spared simply by making an unscheduled stop at her daughter's house. Being the nightmare that he was, Rader couldn't simply let her go, so he embarked on a campaign of terror against her that haunted her and her family for decades to come. When you want to know who could be lurking under your bed or in your closet, make sure to open the newest chapter of the American Serial Killer Guidebook.